the Prime Minister, he often calls Vancouver his second home. Justin Trudeau was in town this week. He unveiled a renter's Bill of Rights right here ahead of next month's federal budget.
It would create a nationwide standard for lease agreements, give renters a clear history of apartment pricing so they can bargain fairly, and make sure they have more agency. We're also going to launch a new legal aid fund that will protect tenants against unfairly rising rents, rent evictions, and bad landlords.
So joining us now here in studio with their thoughts, our Soapbox Social panel. Mo Amir is the host of the podcast This is Vancouver. Hello there.
Hi, Gloria. I love this outfit, by the way.
Thank
Great
you.
swagger.
Thank you. It's kind of my Annie Hall look, from way back when. Kyla Lee is also with us, Vancouver criminal lawyer for Acumen Law Corporation. Kyla, hello.
Hello.
What did you think of the announcement in terms of what difference this could actually make for people who rent in places, expensive places like Vancouver?
Well, I first of all want to say I don't think that Justin Trudeau should be calling Vancouver his second home, because we're not supposed to have second homes right now.
Right.
Everyone's supposed to have one.
Yeah.
But I'm not impressed by it. I think a lot of it is probably unconstitutional because the federal government doesn't have the power to make rules about property and civil rights in the provinces. So it doesn't get any more close to property and civil rights than your right to do what you want with your property. So I don't see a lot of this actually being within the scope of the federal government's authority for the things that are, like dealing with the Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation. These are things that they could easily do right now, and often things that they could do by regulation. So I kind of feel like this is a little bit of promising to gain support and not acting to show that you're serious. And as far as a rental history and allowing tenants to negotiate, I simply don't think that landlords are going to negotiate with tenants. I'm sorry, but if you can list your place for $2,800 a month and get $2,800 a month just because you were previously renting it out for $1,250 is not going to put renters in a better position to say, well, what about $1,400? Will you take 14?
Right. No, he actually talked about sort of bargaining, and we had David Hudniak of Landlord BC on with us earlier this afternoon as well, talking about sort of that power structure right now. Mo, what do you think? How much substance was in the announcement about renters specifically yesterday?
Well, this was clearly a pre-budget announcement, so maybe there's going to be more when they actually roll out the full budget. I think there were some interesting things here. I can't speak on the legalities or constitutionality of any of this, but this idea of rental lease agreements having some sort of standardization, I kind of like. Transparency isn't bad. I think he'd also talked about, an aid fund to help renters if they're rent evicted, sort of an after-the-fact policy. But they really highlighted this credit score thing about if you're able to pay your rent, it's gonna help your credit score. That is not what's preventing people from home ownership, right? It's the affordability part. And so as much as we talk about protecting renters, which we absolutely need. I mean, you see these listings that require wild things from renters like no guests or no cooking, and apparently they're all above board. I do firmly believe that renters require more protections. But this idea of it'll help your credit score, it's not really addressing the issue. And we all understand that not one thing is going to solve the housing crisis, but to pretend that this is going to help affordability doesn't make a lot of sense. And we need to focus on policies that will help reduce rents and help reduce the cost of home ownership.
Well, sure. And obviously the press conference was to show that the Liberals are sympathetic to renters' plight across the country, that type of thing. However, the national debate over carbon pricing did follow the Prime Minister here to Vancouver as well. Just listen to how he responded to a reporter's question about that yesterday.
But for ideological reasons, or reasons of pure partisanship, conservative politicians across this country are not telling the truth to Canadians. And that's why I called them out. And I'm going to continue to call them out and remind them that if they really don't like our approach to pricing pollution, they can develop their own approach. Here in BC, that's what a BC more conservative government did years ago.
So that was the Prime Minister in Vancouver yesterday. So Mo, as you're listening to that, I mean, what do you make of his response? I mean, not just the substance of the response, but the tone.
Right. Yeah. I mean, this is a prime minister that knows that his party is losing. And it's going to take a while for them to turn that around or to to change the shifting moods in this country. It's not going to happen overnight. He does have to go off on the offensive, which I think he is certainly in that clip. It's going to take a while to resonate. As we talked about last week, whether you think the carbon tax is good policy or bad policy, it is a political loser right now. People are struggling with affordability wherever they can get, some relief on anything, even if it's not as overblown as perhaps some of his opponents make it out to be. They're going to gravitate towards that, and unless he can provide an alternative which actually saves them money, it's going to be a really tough sell. And again, this idea of rebate checks and you getting more in your rebate than you actually pay on the carbon tax, that's not proven to be a winner yet. And so it'll be interesting to see how he handles this, or if he eventually caves on the carbon tax and maybe some of the increases.
Well, it's curious. I mean, Kyla, how much can we read into that, do you think? And I really am, thinking about the tone, the presentation overall, how Trudeau feels about his own political future and that of his party in the next federal election.
I mean, to me, the tone sounds exasperated. I think he's tired of the discussion because the discussion is following him everywhere. And I think it's also telling that he picked up on a line that we have as kind of like a made in BC left-leaning political talking point, which is to point to former, more conservative governments like the former BC Liberals and say, well, they did it. It's all their fault. And that's why you're in this position. And that's essentially what he's doing. He didn't outright say it, but he did say, there was a previous conservative government in this province who did their own carbon pricing. And I think he's trying to sort of capitalize, at least in BC, on some of the success that the NDP continues to have with rolling out that line and using that to gain support from people who are likely to vote for them.
But by saying, what is your approach, he knows that the answer is going to be, we're not going to tax people on this.
Tax the tax. That's
we're not
the
going to do
approach.
anything on this, right? And I think that's the fear, is that they're just going to say, we're not going to touch this at all.
Well, we'll see what happens April 1st.
Yeah.
April 1st is when it's supposed to come in. Let's switch to municipal politics right now.
Not Surrey policing, though, right?
No,
okay,
not Surrey. Not this week. I'm not saying not ever. I'm saying not this week. But this is near and dear to your heart. You live on the North Shore, Mo.
I do.
The North Shore wastewater treatment plant.
Great tourist attraction.
Costs are absolutely skyrocketing. I mean, 5 times what the original estimates were. Jonathan Wilkinson, the Liberal MP for North Vancouver, Minister of Natural Resources, he fielded a call about that yesterday.
But I do think on a go-forward basis that it will be important that Metro Vancouver can be very forthright with people who live particularly on the North Shore about how we went from something that was less than $800 million to now something that is close to $4 billion and is going to add significant amounts of costs to the taxpayers' bills. That is not the responsibility of the federal government. They clearly have to meet regulations with respect to water quality coming out of that plant. They're both federal and provincial. But ultimately, the management of that plant and the management of the process of construction is the responsibility of the region.
Okay, so Mo, what goes through your mind? And he's saying significant cost to the taxpayers. I mean, it's going to mean per household more than $700 extra per year for the next 30 years.
Yeah. I'll be collecting CPP before this project is paid for, which is wild, right? And I think what at the core of this, I mean, this whole thing is shrouded in a lot of secrecy, and that might be because of the impending lawsuits between Metro Vancouver and the contractor Axonia. Mm-hmm. But there's a very simple question here. How did we get a $3 billion cost overrun on this project? It doesn't make any sense that we went from under $1 billion to now close to $4 billion, and now the completion time went from 3 years to 2030. They're saying this is going to be built. I genuinely believe that Metro Vancouver as an organization needs to be held accountable. They were the decision makers. They were the ones that went through this process. And it's simply unfair that the residents of North Vancouver, who never elected anyone for this, can't really hold their own council accountable for this because they're not the ones responsible. I think the people of Metro Vancouver in general and certainly North Vancouver and West Vancouver need accountability for Metro Vancouver about how this happened and how we got here.
Right. Kyla, how do you think we can avoid this kind of fiasco in the future?
We need better oversight of big projects like this. We need the provincial government or the federal government, or maybe both, to step in and create very clear regulations about how to report to the public on cost overruns, how to be accountable to the public when things are starting to balloon in cost, not once it's gotten to the point that it's completely unmanageable. And I think until we have a way to constrain the work that's sort of being done by municipal governments and then amalgamations of municipalities that don't really have any accountability to any particular taxpayer, we aren't going to see anybody taking responsibility when things like this get completely out of hand.
We used to have an Auditor General for local government, which was winded down, and then in 2021, the province basically stopped funding it. So, that's one step to bring back some sort of Auditor General. But I certainly think, for projects of this size, to have sort of tracking so that people are not caught off guard with a $3 billion cost overrun overnight, apparently, right? Like, this wasn't really in the news or not talked about before this all came to light.
Right. Well, I have to confess, I wanted to wrap up on something a little bit of a sweet note, I guess, because the On the Coast members today, we've been on a little bit of a sugar buzz. Lots of little chocolate eggs, and it's hard to stop once you start.
I saw the handful you gave to Darius. Yeah. That was very nice.
Multicolored. So as we kick off the Easter weekend, then I want to hear from you, Mo. When should there be an age limit, I guess, on Easter egg hunts? When are you too old to take part in a hunt?
I'm going to back up my friend Kyla here. I know what she's going to say. No, there should be no age limit. And if Kyla wants to smoke these kids in an Easter egg hunt while they're still looking down at their untied shoes, then all the power to you, Kyla. You get those eggs.
Is that you? Is that you in the Easter egg hunt?
That is not me in the Easter egg hunt, only because when the Easter Bunny visits my family, he's very egalitarian. Everybody gets a very large bag of their own individual candy, but it is all hidden really hard.
Okay.
So people are smoking themselves trying to find it.
So you're saying no age limit either?
No age limit. My grandmother and grandfather participated in our annual Easter egg hunt until just shortly before they both passed.
Oh, lovely. So it's a real family affair.
It is.
Listen, I hope you all have a great weekend. We've got very little treats just to whet your appetite. Within arm's length. You have to do your own Easter egg hunt here in Studio
Is there a
10.
time limit? Can I just stay here for the rest of the show? Make sure I get everyone.
That's the only hint that you get within arm's distance.